Thank you, Shaylin. Am I being heard?
Yes.
Back here? Good, good. And maybe I should ask, am I being heard in the incognito room? Or is that, my wife said that. I know it's called an overflow room, but I don't think that applies right now, so let's give it another name. Of course, Shaylin's been great, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. And when I say with, I mean with, because I believe in interaction, discussion. In fact, you'll find that that's a lot of what my book is about in terms of discussion of some things that are very important in our society today, not just in the state of Alabama. I mean, it may be the unmaking of an Alabama racist, but certainly the subject's not confined to Alabama. And the more presentations I make and the more discussions I have with readers, the more I find the shapes and the forms that it takes in all over the place, in the United States, certainly. But I want to start by doing something that I found really a good thing to do to start. And that is to help some people who are here. And this is going to be pretty quick. I'm going to help somebody in this audience. I know it. And by doing what I'm about to do, you may be the one. I don't know. Maybe more than one. But I always find there's somebody that I help by doing this. Okay, now this, what she had up here portrayed the author's name. You know, it was the front of the book. And the author's name is here, and I wish I had done something to where you could see that more clearly as it is on the book. But I don't know if you've seen the book, read the book, or not. But the author's name here is listed as S. period, that's the initial. And then the middle name is given as capital M, little c, capital E, A-C-H-I-N. And then the last name, I'll give this one to you, it's Otts, O-T-T-S. But what I want to ask you to do is to attempt to pronounce the middle name. Now, you can be working on the first name if you want to, because you're going to have to guess that, obviously. It starts with an S. And if you know something about me, you're an insider or something like that, please don't give it away. But if you want to take a shot at it, capital M, little c, capital E, A-C-H-I-N. Anybody want to give it a shot? Good try.
That was wrong?
That was wrong. Is that yours?
Okay, action.
Good shot. Not bad. Not right. Anybody else?
McKeachin.
Oh, you know, that's the favorite, I think. It makes sense. I mean, that you pronounce McKeachin. No, that's not it. Okay, one more. Anybody? You want to give it a try?
It's been taken.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. McCann. McCann.
Okay.
You say, well, that should be simple. It's M-C-C-A-N-N or C-A, something like that, right? No. M-C-E-A-C-H-I-N. McKeachin. Okay, let's take the Scottish thing here and let's just say McKeachin and forget that H. McKeachin. But Americanized McCann. Okay, so now you may feel like, how did that help you? Well, it's not a matter of helping your pronunciation or recognition of strange words or something like that. But let's get to the first. I'll tell you in a minute. The first name starts with an S. Oh boy, everybody can guess something. I mean, you know, somebody take a shot at it. It could be Stephen. Good try. That would be nice. Stephen McKee. I like that. Samuel. Sylvester. That could be it. No. Sebastian. No. No. And I'm going to tell you, nobody has gotten this, and I've been doing this for a while now around in different places. Nobody has gotten this right. Of course, my wife knows. But nobody has gotten it right. Shirley. Shirley. Okay, now, how does that help you? There's bound to be somebody in here who has a tough name. There's bound to be, if not here, in that other room or something, somebody who has a name that gives them trouble. People can't pronounce it. You have all kinds of struggles over your name. And in my case, it's not just pronunciation, is it? I was at the University of Alabama for 7 years, and I had a time when I needed to access my records. Well, at the time, back in the Ice Age, they kept the records separate, the Dean of Women's Office and the Dean of Men's. I went to the Dean of Men's, of course, looking for my records. They were not there, so you know where they were. But that's just one example of the complications of my name. So, of course, the book, to avoid confusion, let's just put S on there, McCann, and let people struggle over that. Not much you can do with it. Otts, people do that. Otis, I get all kinds of things. So here I am offering this therapeutic lesson for you. Those of you who think you have hard names, feel better. You don't have the kind of name I have, I think. And if anybody does and you don't want to talk about it out in public, talk to me later. I'd like to know about it. It might make me feel better. I don't know. But, I'm a late author, of course. I think you can tell that. I mean, I've been around a while. And I hadn't written a book. And, of all people to write a book, me. And I have plenty of friends that would, say the same thing. But the question you get a lot when you're that kind of author is, well, why in the world did you do it? Why did you write a book? You trying to make money? What's the deal? Well, I'm going to tell you how long first it took me to write the book. 20 years. Now, you might think, well, why would it take 20 years? Because when you ask me questions like that, when people ask me questions like that, I have to divide it into two parts. The first question really would be, why did you start writing? The second would be, why did you decide to seek publication? I wrote for about almost half of that time for nobody to read. Nobody. I was writing purely for my own understanding because I was that kind of writer at the time. Legal pads, writing your thoughts. I didn't do diary. I wouldn't call it diary. Sometimes my writing was ahead of my thoughts, it seemed. I would just write. You couldn't read it. It was just scribbled out. But I did that for one reason, to understand something that had become important. I wanted to understand why I came to be an 18-year-old boy with a tire iron in my hand watching a peaceful civil rights demonstration. 1965. And there I was with a tire iron in my hand. And I said in the book, iron in my hand and iron in my heart. And that's the way it was. So, why did I want to understand it? Well, by this time, my wife and I, we had adopted a mixed race child, a child of mixed race. And we encountered some reactions to that. Not as bad as it would have been 20 years before, 10 years before, and a lot better today than it was when we adopted, certainly. But I encountered negative reactions. We did. Okay. So that alone didn't make me want to write as I did. By that time, I had become a counselor. And I was counseling people about relationships, of course, which is what you do in counseling a lot. You know, bad relationships, dealing with other people, family, relationship difficulties, challenges. And so it dawned on me that I didn't even understand the relationship between me and those people that were demonstrating when I was 18 years old. I didn't understand how I was that person. I had changed. So, you know, at first it may be simple. You say, well, you grew up that way. I decided I'm not going to take that view. I decided I was going to go back and look at this thing carefully, objectively, back off. Look at my own background, family, yes, I was going to do that. But beyond that, family ancestors, back to my great-great-grandfather who was a slave owner down near Greensboro, Alabama, my hometown, which is pictured on the front of the book. And I wanted to understand how things had happened, how it had rolled forward to me standing on that street curb that day. So I started looking into that. I did some research. I wrote. And then I was teaching a night class in sociology, college class. And if you know, night classes, what you have in night classes normally, you have a lot of working adults. And I was teaching this class in Mobile, and it was Faulkner University night class in sociology. And in doing that, we came to a chapter that was on race and race relations in America. So I'm going through this and teaching and preparing lessons and that sort of thing like you usually do, and it occurred to me that I should tell my story. It fit the context perfectly. So I told a brief version of my story. And students in the class seemed very attentive, very tuned in to what I was saying. And I broke them up into discussion groups afterwards. And I made sure that the groups were mixed. It was definitely interracial in my class. Had a number of police in there. It just happened to be, you know, there was some kind of premium on criminal justice. I don't know if they were, at the time, putting a lot into stipends for that or what the deal was. But anyway, and sociology was a required course. So I mixed them in liberally. I thought that might be a good idea, you know, make sure all the police were in one group and that sort of thing. And it made an interesting dynamic, really, because there was a lot of street talk going on. I mean, people talking about realities of things. But what I challenged them to do is really what this book is designed to do. And I'm very straightforward about this. I'm not here to sell a book or sell books to you. I'm here to enlist you. I'm here to get people involved in what I call a new conversation on race. And it is new. And I believe that fully. All the research I've done, all the talk I've done with people reinforces the fact that we have not had this conversation. So the book is as transparent as you're going to read. It is the truth. It gets into the innermost workings of my family. You could say there's psychology in it. There's sociology in it for sure. There's history. I have a high school teacher now. This is a private school, but he read the book and he said, I'm going to require it of my sophomores and juniors. And he wants me to come and speak to his classes first of the year. I've had other high school teachers tell me that upon reading the book to say to me, I want all my students to read this book because they have no real perspective on this. They say they don't really know about this. And somebody not long ago said one of the things that's unique about it, not only being as transparent as it is, but it has history wrapped all around your accounts. of your life. And see, when I look at it, it's not a memoir. And a lot of it'll get classified as a memoir. But it's very historical. I did a lot of research for this. What was happening not only in terms of my family, my life, but also culture. What was happening in that culture in my hometown? What had been the history? What was involved in all this? All the way up through the civil rights movement and what was happening in Selma and a number of places. Somebody the other day told me they wish they had read this book before they saw the movie, Selma. I don't really know what they meant because we didn't have a good conversation, didn't have the opportunity to do that. But I don't know what that means. All I know is it's very much historical and has a lot of what was going on in Alabama, not only in Alabama, in the South and in our country, in terms of race and race relations. So the book is designed to be absolutely transparent. And I'm not embarrassed. I think I'm old enough now where I just don't care. So you know about the struggles of my family, so you know about the alcoholism or, somebody being at Bryce Hospital that was in my family and, all these different things. Whatever, I feel that this is what we've missed. Who controls the conversation on race relations today?
The news media.
The news, the media. And that's the way it is. I want you to control it. I want us to control it. I want grassroots people like us not to just take what somebody's saying on a TV screen or the internet or any other place, but to take our own experience and our own lives and our own awareness and begin to talk about it that way. Okay, I'm not going to try to take apart everything that happened in Ferguson or any other place. I don't know. I'm not sure about it. You get all these messages out here. But I know that people have been talking about it. Things like that generate a lot of talk, right? You've talked about it. Sure you have. Everybody's talked about it. But who have you talked to? I want us to have a new conversation. I want that conversation to be transparent where we're willing to share our experience. We're willing to say, here's where I view this thing today. And we're asking other people to do the same thing and open it up and get to where we can talk about these things transracially, outside of our little group. I had a fellow, 50 some odd years old. He told me, he said, do you know, I've been assaulted 3 times in my life. This is a white man in his 50s. And all 3 were by black men. He said, you don't think that affects my perspective on race? I said, well, I guess it does. I mean, And I said, but let me ask you this. Have you ever said what you're telling me outside your immediate family or close friends? Have you ever shared it? He said, no. I said, bingo. That's what I want. That's what I want the book to do. It did it in his case. And so somebody said, well, are you changing people from being racist to not being racist? No, you know what I'm doing? And what I hope this book is doing, I hope it's planting a seed. And whatever I do with it, I hope helps that seed to grow. And that is for us to have a more transparent, inclusive talk about race. Instead of making it the politically correct conversation only, we've got to allow for some things to be talked about. We can't shut them off. This man needs to say that. And he needs to say it not only to me, but to you. And if you're black, he needs to say it to you. That's the way I look at it. In order for us to make progress, we've got to bring it down to the grassroots. And we've got to talk openly and inclusively where we're not afraid of the subjects that may come up, the topics, and we're not afraid of the people that come up. Yes, ma'am.
We want to hear your story.
Yes, and I will sell the book. Because that is the story, such as it is. But when I had that kind of response that I had in the sociology class, I determined then that people need this. And what I've found since then only reinforces it, believe me. And I am wide open to discussing it and helping people with it, coming in, helping groups. But where I want to call us to account is personally, as individuals. You have friends, and some friends, you can't talk about certain things with. Why can't we talk about this? Come on. We've been adolescents in our country. And by the way, that's not strange. That's not really strange. Because in one of the interviews I did because I went back to my hometown, and I said, has the culture changed? I knew I had changed. Has the culture changed there? And I interviewed people. 2 were former demonstrators, black women who were demonstrators at that long, hot summer of 1965. Selma and Greensboro, the little place that got national attention for a little while. And they were really wonderful interviews that I had with them. I had 2 other interviews with my contemporaries who grew up there and stayed there. And they were in the last segregated graduating class of Greensboro High School, the one that I was in. So that was great. But one of the women told me, she said, people say, why don't black people do this? Why can't they do that? Stuff like that. She said, honey, we've only been free 50 years. That is a striking thing to think about. And when you say that, people could say, well, they weren't slaves. Black people, you weren't a slave 50 years ago. I know you've been around probably 50 years. I'm guessing. But, it's like, so what are you saying? Well, when you can't go to a restroom, when you can't choose to go and use a water fountain, are you free? No, you're not free. So it has only been 50 years. At that time, 50 years ago. One of the, just as a little byword here, one of the women that I interviewed was 95 years old when I interviewed her. She was in her mid-40s when she went to the demonstration in downtown Greensboro. She lived out in the country and didn't have a car. And she and a friend got a ride, came in, and her reason for participating in that demonstration was, she said, my mom and daddy had never voted and I wanted to see them vote. And boy, I tell you, if you knew this lady, and you won't know her, she's deceased now. She died 2 weeks before this book came out. And I wanted so much for the book to come out before. But she did get a chance to read the part where she had been interviewed and everything. She loved it. But special person. Somebody who had her children grown with their children and all, and successful and happy people. And she was proud of them. And I thought, when you read about her experience, I'll be surprised if you don't have the reaction I had. I didn't cry in front of her. I'm about to do it here if I don't look out. But it was just amazing to me. So I've also had somebody sent me a note and said, this is the best accounting of results on a personal level of our demonstrations. And this was somebody who came from elsewhere to participate in demonstrations. And I thought that alone, I've had so many, just single things that tell me all that effort with this book has paid off. That one right there is good enough. That helps a lot. But there are so many things that I think people can get as sort of byproducts. So I push the book a lot because I think it has the kind of content that people need to be challenged to open up and begin to have this kind of conversation at the grassroots level. And by the way, I was a while ago remarking about the Confederate flag issue, and I don't mind remarking about any issue because that's what I'm pitching, right? And you know, here's the facts about that from my perspective. We should have dealt with that a long time ago. There should have been no problem over it. But why wasn't there? Because we weren't talking. You know, had been a movement in the legislature, driven, of course, right over here, you know, in the corner, driven by the Black Caucus group in the legislature to do that before, to remove it. Well, that's fine and dandy. But why do we have to have some big crisis thing or something? Why can't the grassroots communicate about those kinds of things, talk about those kinds of things openly, and get them done? It could have been done without all the hullabaloo and having to make a really tremendous crisis to cause us to come to the table over it and make the change. Credit to the governor. I think he did the right thing to lower it. And by the way, I'm not one of those people that begrudges people who have Confederate flags for themselves. There are genuinely people who are historically very interested in that of history, who do have family things related to that, and they have a sense of preservation about symbols and things like that. And I think that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But for us to have something like that to represent us, when to so many people it means the kind of pain and agony that you and I will never face personally, but they have had it in their family, in their ancestors, and in the treatment from there. By the way, I'm not one of those people that says every slave was horribly, cruelly treated at the hands of plantation owners. I know that was not the case, but slavery itself is cruel, just cruel. You know, and in Alabama, it's supposed to be against the law to separate children from their parents, but it happened, and the law wasn't always enforced. You know, that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's just one example, but the very idea of slavery is repugnant, totally. So there's no glory in that. No glory in that flag as far as today is concerned. But if people value historical preservation and that kind of thing, fine. Okay, I went far enough and maybe too far on that. But what I'd like to do is take a minute here, and I don't know, am I okay? A few, all right. I told her, I'm not one of those people you give the subtle hints to. You just say, shut up, you know, something like that. I found a lot of people who say, I want to move on. I don't want to talk about it. And by the way, President Obama said we've had enough talk. I respectfully disagree with that. We've had more than enough of a certain kind of talk. I think we just need a new talk. But there are a lot of people who say, hey, I was not a slave owner. I was not there on that street curb that day. I didn't mistreat people, you know, that sort of thing. So why do I have to do anything about it? Well, if you want us to make progress on it in our country, if you want to have a united country, then better do something about it, because it's gonna be here. And by the way, I think race is too convenient. It's like this hook. And what do we have as human beings? Hang-ups. So where do you put a hang-up? The nearest hook. You know, race is very convenient. It's apparent. You don't have to search. Say, oh, your skin's a little different color. What do you know? There it is. So I don't think that we necessarily look on this side of real true equality, and I'm a Christian, and I think I know where that is, and I'm headed there. So, you know, there's going to be equality. For me, I know. And I hope for you. But this is something that I came up with, and I got to finish this. Don't interrupt me in the middle of this, please. It's a song. Okay, anybody that wants to leave while I'm doing this, I'll understand. My wife, tolerant lady, really, she puts up with this over and over. And I keep wanting to do it because this song says a lot about that idea of just let's move on, and that kind of thing. And I want to see if anybody in here knows the song. The name of it is The Cat Came Back. Anybody? You know it?
Yeah, the cat came back the very next day.
Whoa! Hey, the last time I did this in Huntsville, and there was one person too, and it was a larger group than this, and there was one person who knew it. So that may be the pattern. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm going to sing it if you want to join in. Okay. Now, old Uncle John had troubles of his own. He had an old yellow cat that wouldn't leave home. He tried everything he knew to keep the cat away. He even gave it to the preacher and he told it for to stay. But the cat came back. The cat came back. I thought he was a goner, but the cat came back 'cause he wouldn't stay away. Now the cat was a terror, and he thought it was best to give it to a fellow who was heading out west. The train went around the corner and it hit a broken rail. Not a soul above the train lived to tell the tale. But the cat came back. The cat came back. I thought he was a goner, but the cat came back 'cause he wouldn't stay away. There's more. He gave the old cat to a man in a balloon. He told him to leave it with the man in the moon. The balloon, it busted, and everybody said 10 miles away they picked the man up dead. But the cat came back. The cat came back. I thought he was a goner, but the cat came back 'cause he wouldn't stay away. Now the farmer on the corner gonna kill the cat on sight. He's loaded up his gun full of nails and dynamite. He waited in the garden till the cat came round. 7 little pieces of the man was all they found. But the cat came back. The cat came back. I thought he was a goner, but the cat came back 'cause he wouldn't stay away. Okay, so, no applause, that's all right. Thanks. I think, the simple lesson is obvious there. You think you can just get rid of it and just ignore it or pass it on, or somebody else will take care of it, which is a lot of what we've done with race relations. But that's just not the case. The cat will come back. And sometimes it comes back with a vengeance. So again, and I normally would read you something from the book, but I think I've pressed my time today.
Got a couple minutes if you want to do an excerpt.
Whoa, I don't know. That's a lot of pressure. And of course you have to have your glasses, and I'm using up the minutes. Okay, I'm going to read this. And this does come from the account I give of watching this demonstration. This is in the middle of the account, really. There must have been at least 100 demonstrators, younger teenage blacks, older teens, young adults, and middle-aged blacks, and several older adults. Most I didn't recognize. Some were locals, although I didn't know them well. A handful of young adult whites were scattered through the group, obviously from out of town. Later, I learned that many were college students from places like UCLA or Princeton. To me, they were traitors to their own race. Outsiders thinking they were smarter and better, even so impertinent as to consider themselves made of better stuff than veterans of world wars. Many of us thought their attitudes nothing short of asinine. I probably hated them even more than black demonstrators, though I knew nothing about them. It did not matter. The number of highway patrolmen, deputies, and policemen quickly multiplied on the porch steps and front sides of the courtyard. Marchers filled the yard and spilled out on the main street. Those at the front stopped short of the first courthouse step. Though not described in news accounts, there was a significant pause in the midst of all the activity and noise. Protesters stood virtually soundless. Even the heckling subsided. There was some shifting among the demonstrators. Then all movement ceased completely, and one lone female voice began singing, "Amazing Grace." Other marchers joined the chorus. It was quiet, heartfelt version of this hymn. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. It was only a few verses followed by momentary silence, the kind when seconds are more like minutes. In front of the Gulf station, I stood holding the tire iron, transfixed by the scene. Suddenly, the big courthouse clock gonged on the hour, and the old familiar sound startled me. The clock's tone, so clear in that moment of silence, rang out more than once, as if on cue, synchronized with the crisis. Him or not, heckling renewed with even more volume. A car that had been serviced in our shop was parked with its front bumper close to the Gulf sign near where I was standing, and I stepped up onto the car's front bumper, leaning with my free hand against the thick metal sign pole. I still held tight to the tire iron, my arms slightly cocked in a ready position, adrenaline pushing me toward whatever came next. Suddenly, there was a scuffle at the front of the courthouse steps. Pandemonium followed. Officers on the steps ran into the scattering crowd with weapons drawn, pushing the crowd back. Some demonstrators tried to flee, a few stumbling and falling. Some of the white hecklers rushed into the crowd with raised fists or crude weapons. A black woman fell and was helped up by another demonstrator. Around the statue, white men were clubbing and relentlessly pummeling victims with their fists. Shrill screams rose from those victims and others. I saw a woman hit solidly on the chin. Some demonstrators were quickly held at gunpoint by authorities. To my knowledge, no demonstrator retaliated or fought back, but it all happened so fast. With their batons extended, authorities quickly pushed into the crowd and backed up most demonstrators and white attackers. In the confusion, I could not tell if anyone was arrested. It was years later that I remembered something that had somehow been blocked from my conscious mind. While many demonstrators scattered, I jumped down from my perch on the car bumper. In the chaos and rush, a few ran close to me, and I drew that tire iron back over my head. In the pit of my stomach, I felt a powerful mix of rage, panic, and fear. It could well have surged into the tire iron, but it did not. At some point, I dropped my hands and the iron. In the aftermath, maybe I was in a state of shock. I do not recall talking about that day in detail until years later away from Greensboro. My racial views hadn't changed that day. But surely it was a radical event in my life that I tried to forget, unsuccessfully as it turned out. In the heat of a moment, people can do violent things. I was at the wrong place and time, armed, fueled by generations of hate, accelerated by a chaotic crowd. I shudder to think what might have happened if any of those fleeing the scene had even brushed me. Their lives and mine could have changed in an instant. So that is where all of this centers in the book, really those moments in time that I used to pivot and look past and forward and to consider how I became the person I became on that curve, how I changed, what about the culture and how it changed. And I re-examined that and brought it all forward to the recent years. So there you go. That's about as much as I can possibly say about this. I can say a lot more. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put it that way. You can probably tell I'm one of those that has to be called down. But any questions that anybody has, or can we do that? Yeah, okay, good.
You mentioned that you adopted a biracial child.
Yes.
And knowing that if that child was 1/8 black, it was black. So what did you encounter, you and your wife, in raising that child, and how did that experience affected your thinking?
Okay. Let me set one thing straight, because I've been asked this a number of times. Was I undone as a racist prior to or after we adopted our son? And it was prior to. So there's no doubt about that. But as far as it's a real good question in terms of the effect and the kinds of things that you dealt with then compared to now, in fact. But we had, fortunately, we had a little bit of an unusual situation in that as our son grew up, he was a gifted athlete. Now, can you imagine what difference that makes?
Yes.
He got a lot of positive attention. We got a lot of positive attention. But when he was an infant and small and that kind of thing, from family, we didn't have a lot of people criticizing us and that sort of thing. It was just the caution, the standoff kind of thing, the thing about, have you thought about that? You know, all these different concerns and things that people may have about that kind of thing. From other people, we encountered other things, and we never had anybody verbally attack us, you know, along those lines. But one example, even when he was an athlete, a standout athlete and everything, we had somebody at a basketball game from the visiting team, so they didn't know us. They were sitting behind us. And by then, he was in a private school. He'd been in public schools and private schools. Then he was in a private school. And the person behind us said, after he did something great in the game, they said, that's what we sent our son to private school to avoid. Well, my wife don't take it laying down. I actually hesitated. She got up and she put them straight pretty quick. And so there, you know, we had those kinds of things that happened at times. And the thing is with us, we just loved him. And by the way, we've had an interesting thing here, I'll tell you real quick. Carol, my wife, he was in foster care. And the people who had him in foster care were in our church. And so she fell in love with him right away. We had already had one adopted daughter. She said that she was very interested. I said, it's just not time. You know, I'm not, you know, I'm the man, I'm being practical about this thing, you know. And so we go to this fellowship meal, and he's there with his foster parents in a stroller, and the mother has to go do something, and she leaves him, and I happen to be standing right where she left him. And he's here in the stroller, and I'm here. We're both just lollygagging. And I looked down at him, and he was looking up at me, and there it was. There was no turning back then. He had me. And he is today a coach and a teacher and just a great model for people. You talk about making a difference. He makes a difference. And, you know, I'm glad that God gave us that opportunity. But then as far as the way it affects us, for sure, it makes a difference in the sense that you have a sensitivity to it that not everybody has. So you're alert. And when you notice things that may be shadows or anything like that. And by the way, people who grow up with this kind of thing, it's not like you don't have shadows of it that come back. You know, my grandmother whispered the words that are the title. When I was 6 years old, she said, "You are better than them, and don't you forget it." And that's what she meant. And you live that way, you grow up that way. So you're in a grocery line checking out, and somebody's got a child, acting up child or something, and they're taking a long time at the checkout. And the question I ask people a lot of times is, if they're of a different race than yours, are you a little bit more impatient with them? It's just a shadow. And as long as people recognize that for what it is, like any other relationships, you recognize the thing that's there and you say, wait a minute, that's not really what I decide is the way that I want to relate to that person. And you put it over here. As long as you're doing that, it's okay. But not everybody has the same level of sensitivity, for sure. And we're sensitive to that. Yes.
I know you don't have much time left, but
Yeah.
could you briefly tell us how you managed to get undone as an Alabama racist?
Wow. Hey, again I say, I'm selling the book. No, the real deal about that is, I'll tell you now, it is not an event. And, I've had people ask me, well, have you had anybody who's read the book has basically changed from being a racist? Well, no, but I don't expect that. People don't change like instantly most of the time. Now, sometimes people have like a Christian conversion or something. They recognize there's something there that they need to repent of. Well, that's different. But the idea that people don't need time, they need time to process all this stuff, But how are they going to process it if nobody's talking to them about it? I'm just saying. So they go and talk to their friends. I don't know how many people have told me their family, they have some members of their family who they know they're racist, they have those views and everything, because when they have these family parties, they hear what they're saying. Well, you got to talk to them. And we've got to open this thing up and find out where people are, and then help them. Yes.
I have lived here now just a little over 2 years, and what I've learned is that I have made many white friends who said, don't even think about it. Now, obviously, I'm from the North. The minute I got out of nursing school, I worked in Harlem for 7 years. So my orientation is totally different.
Yeah.
But I say to a new lady that I met, well, where are all the black people in the restaurants here? And, well, I don't know. And it's that kind of thing just amazes me, simply amazes me. And these are all women that I've met at church. Mm-hmm. They don't want to have the conversation.
That's right.
I am always talking black-white. And finally, I have a black friend. I think I'll stay now.
Yeah.
But we talk about it all the time, that it never occurs to us that I'm white and her skin is darker than mine.
Because you have a relationship.
Like each other.
Yeah. And let me ask you something. What is race relations about? Relationships.
Yes.
By the way, also church, when is the most segregated hour in the United States? Well, and I'm not for forcing churches together, by the way, by any means. I'm for grassroots relationships and beginning to talk about the things that we never talk about. And I believe the South is uniquely positioned. In fact, there's racism all over this country, and I know that because I've had people tell me about it all over the place. It's there. But where you can open up conversation and get people to deal with things and talk about it, you have much better chance of progress. As a family counselor, I learned that quick. You can't have a family where you got somebody who won't talk about the problem and overcome those problems in your family. And they're going to affect everybody. You can't just have that person say, oh, I'll just move on and I don't have to think about that, that sort of thing. Well, it's the same thing in terms of race relations in our country. And I don't know about you, but I think it's just time that we grow up and start having adult conversations about race relations. And by the way, you don't have to make a big effort and say, I'm going to do this and this and this today. All you got to do is wait for the opportune times. They're there all the time. Things come up. You have relationships. Don't hide from them.
Okay, so we are just about at the hour, so if anyone has any additional questions, you're welcome to come up and speak with Mr. Otts up here at the front. Thank you all for coming out today, and thank you, Mac, for speaking here at the archives.
Oh, glad to do it. Thank you.
Oh,